Whew, here we go.
Yeah, here we go. This is a hot one, and this is really important to both Dylan and I. And, the thing is, our life goes on. We still go to client properties. And so when it comes to CWD, CWD, point number one, is serious.
So absolutely.
We both believe that. It's something serious. Anything is serious. I look at EHD. We've both had clients that have lost deer to EHD. I've had clients that have lost over 40 deer, like in the neighborhood, and meaning they were dying out in the swamp. They had to actually get air conditioning because it was on the west side of their property, and there was so much stench coming from the rotting deer late summer that they bought an air conditioning. They felt they couldn't open the windows anymore. I've been on a pond in 2012 in Lower Michigan, where under the ice we counted 7 dead bucks with their antlers in velvet, just walking on the ice. Kind of freaky.
Absolutely.
Looking. So, and you've had many with EHD.
Yeah, with EHD, I mean, it's just one of those things. It's so regional and so unpredictable. But I mean, it's very, very devastating when it comes around.
And it hits heavy.
Yeah, definitely.
And then of course we tour the countryside and we have conversations with our clients about EHD, CWD, and there's even times like this last time I was in January in Ohio. Clients were telling me this story about these deer that were dying, and I said, "You talking about CWD?" They're like, "Oh, no, EHD. We never hear of any deer dying of CWD." And how often do we hear of deer dying CWD? And we're in like next to the epicenter.
Almost all my clients in those areas, southwest Wisconsin, south central Wisconsin, those areas where reportedly very, very high rates of CWD. And I have yet to talk to somebody who's like, "Oh yeah, ever since CWD came here, the deer herd hasn't been the same."
Right, and that's continually what we see. So we do acknowledge it's serious, it's disease. And as people like to point out, it's always fatal, kind of like a gunshot wound to the heart or lung. We need to point out that's fatal too. But a lot of diseases are fatal when you get it. And they'll tout it that, "Oh, this is always fatal." Well, no kidding. A lot of diseases are fatal.
Up about this. I like it.
I'm fired up because it attacks people's livelihoods.
Absolutely.
And not ours. But I worry about this tipping point because I do believe that there should be a change in regulations.
Definitely. Yep.
Here in Minnesota, I enjoy that we get 3 buck tags now instead of 2. I've shot 2 once. I've shot 1 2 other years, but I hunt all the way to the end of the year.
Right.
That gets me out in the woods more. If I want to shoot does, if it's overpopulated, that gives other people more opportunity to shoot more deer, and that opens it up. We have 2 hunts that I participate in. I haven't shot anything in those hunts, the CWD hunts, where if you shoot something, it's mandatory you take that head in. I'm all for that. I'm all for herd monitoring. I'm all for changing regulations that are reasonable. And that's why I call the bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's no good here when it comes to CWD.
Absolutely. That's a good point.
There's nothing. I could even say I've seen cases of EHD. I can think of someone's property I know down in Nebraska where they had way too many deer. And so imagine someone's creating great habitat for bucks and good fall habitat, good thick cover, good fall food, and all of a sudden you have way, way, way too many does. The ratios are out of whack because you fill your property with so many does that you don't have room for bucks. Well, that all of a sudden EHD comes and wipes out half the herd. The next year, the bucks from the neighborhood gravitated to his property because he had the best habitat and it wasn't overrun by does.
That's interesting. Yeah.
And so
crazy scenario.
And so I'm not saying EHD was good, but if you could say there's a good, that's what it's done sometimes.
It just worked out in his favor there.
Yeah, in his case.
Yeah.
Not in every case, certainly.
Absolutely.
But so there's no good when it comes to CWD. I think there needs to be herd monitoring. You're testing heads. That's your choice. I'm not going to say that you're a bad person or a good person for bringing that in. That's up to you. That's a personal decision. And I'll say it's personal. Dylan and I talked about this. I'll ask you, I'll put you on the spot. I don't know if I asked you this when you were talking earlier. Would you eat your deer if it tested positive for CWD?
I don't think I would, but I just choose not to test my deer. It's one of those stigma things. If I knew it was positive, I probably wouldn't eat it, but I just choose not to test my deer, and I mean, who knows? Maybe I've already eaten one that was positive.
Well, let me point out this. Let's say you love chocolate pudding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, love chocolate pudding. Do you see where this is going? Probably not.
Pudding. All right.
So let's say you love chocolate pudding, and someone told you ahead of time that there's a hair in that pudding from the wait staff. Would you eat it?
I don't know. I mean, there's a difference there. I'll know that the hair is in the pudding if I get it, right? But if the deer has CWD, there's no proven.
You can know ahead of time, right?
But yeah, I don't know.
You don't want to chew on a hair.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, see, and the thing is too with that is, if someone told you before, or someone told you after. If they told you after there's a hair in there and you never knew, you just ate the stuff.
Good point.
You wouldn't care.
Loved
I mean,
it.
I've kind of like, oh, well, that sucks. But if I know for me personally, if I know there's a hair in there, I don't eat it. That's kind of nasty, and it ruins the dish. Let's put it that way.
Right.
And so with CWD, there's a lot of well-meaning people. They take it in and they think, well, I'm going to eat it, And then all of a sudden we have all these wasted deer because they. I'd rather not know, because I'd rather just eat the venison. It's never transmitted to humans. What are the odds it transmits to me? Someone in the industry that does this for a living. It could happen, but I'll let myself be that first guinea pig if that happens. It's just the way it goes. It's
sure.
I'll go down eating venison. No big deal. But I still believe in herd monitoring. I believe that there needs to be change in regulations, but not to a tipping point. And I'll go back to, and I'm not going to say this was the exact quote because I hate to misquote somebody, and especially not by permission, but I've had a lot of really good conversations with John Azoga in the past. If you don't know John Azoga, he is the foremost deer research biologist ever in the country. He has the most peer-reviewed articles compared to anybody ever in the entire country. All he did is study deer for the state of Michigan. In fact, they told him you go count nesting birds or tree frogs. He said, no, have a tech do it. That's why he never rose really high in the Michigan DNR, but he did study deer almost an entire career with the state of Michigan in the Camp Cousineau Deer Research Facility, and outside of that too, with guys like Lou Verm. Fredrickson was part of that. And so a lot of those names are referenced within a lot of those research articles and those peer-reviewed articles. But he told me about CWD a long time ago, that it's been out west for decades. I've known about it out west for decades. It hasn't decimated wildlife populations out west for decades. And when everyone else was saying the sky was falling because Wisconsin got CWD in 2002, he was one of the wise people, let me repeat that, wise, experienced, knowledgeable, thoughtful people saying it wasn't, because it had been happening out west for years. So I believe in herd monitoring. I believe, but number 7 down here, I think we should follow the science for COVID. I mean, CWD, I meant CWD.
Hey, wear your mask, don't wear your mask,
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You test your deer, don't test your deer. But I think, when it comes to the follow the science thing, we like to stress, follow common sense as well. And I feel like that can be more of a common sense issue as well as saying, it's been out west forever. Now it's been in Wisconsin for over 20 years. And I have yet to notice a difference. None of my clients that I've talked to have noticed a difference. At what point do we say, you know what, let's go on living our lives and managing our deer herds in that manner that,
Have you seen some of the ridiculous studies that show the average age has gone down with mature bucks, with buck age that the DNR has put out?
It could be pretty easily skewed, though.
Exactly. Numbers lie. People use numbers to lie, so you have to be very careful. That's very political. So anytime politicians, state wildlife agencies are sharing numbers with you, really look at it with common sense and look at it with a high degree of skepticism, because we work with people in these areas that are shooting 5 and 6 deer continuously. We have 7 deer next year on this property in Minnesota, and we have CWD by us. There's sharpshooters around here right now that we'll talk about in a little bit. So we have CWD around us. We have sharpshooters in the area. Yet we have 7 bucks that'll be 5 years old or older that we know of going into the seasons, and a couple of those are going to be 6 years old or older.
Yep.
So we have older age, and they're not being, that hasn't changed. In fact, that's gone up the last few years, even though there's, quote, CWD is more prevalent in the area. One of the things that really gets us fired up, and Dylan too, he had a client talk to him about this. I get random emails about this, but Buffalo County, because they found 1 doe in the center of the county, which you have to be skeptical about how come only 1 doe is found in the entire county, right in the middle of the county.
There's a lot of factors that could go into that. I'm not sure how many deer were tested in the county. But the things that, I hate to be a conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but, how certain are we that this deer was from the county? Maybe there's a reasonable explanation for that. I'm not sure of that story. But, I would also like to know, what are the accuracy of these tests? Could it have been a false positive? I'm not sure how these tests necessarily work, where I hate to cut down the testing and, rule this out as a real positive deer, but could it be that it wasn't, is my just one concern.
And even if it's not, was it brought in by someone else?
Sure.
Did they shoot it somewhere else?
Yeah.
How come it's surrounded by deer that don't have it? And I want to know, there's more questions than answers, and that's when someone says follow the science. Well, there's no science to explain why you have entire wildlife populations. And no, it's not because the states are doing such a great job managing CWD. That's bull.
So that was feedback that I had read online from someone that attended those meetings was, hey, if these are the people that are in charge of, controlling this disease, I have no faith in anyone ever being able to control this disease. And that's not a shot at any agency. That's just, I think we need to look at this as a bigger...
Well, they can't explain it well.
Right.
And so that's part of the problem. And that brings up the risk to all this. The bad, should herd monitor, should change regulations within reason. It is always fatal if a deer contracts it, but how come some deer don't get it? The bottom line is, number 4, Buffalo County, the proposal is for next year is to have unlimited buck and doe tags available from September to February. You basically decimate the herd. That's the answer. Even though they've shown that by spending over $20 million in sharpshooters in Wisconsin, back since 2002, hasn't done a thing. So it really hasn't done anything, because it's a wave. They shoot some here, they shoot some, they don't shoot some. It's not consistent.
You have people there that, you have this landowner that says, oh, it's BS. We're not going to shoot any deer because of CWD. We're going to continue to do what we do. And then you have neighbor C over here that is, we need to kill every deer we can to help this. And so these deer just spread over to here.
Well-meaning person. Well-meaning people, because they'll follow somebody that says you should do this, and they just go with blinders, not considering common sense, and they go do it. No one's thinking for themselves. And we're a bunch of sheep nowadays. We've seen that in the past, whether it's COVID or whatever happens, whatever side of the fence you're on, we're a bunch of sheep, and we're not independent thinkers. And because of that, we follow, and we don't lead. We don't consider other alternatives. We don't look at common sense. And it's a real shame.
That's part of it too, and it gets to be such a hot issue. But at the core of it is a bunch of sportsmen that truly care about whitetails. So
and wildlife and hunters in general.
And so that's where you've got two people pitted against each other based on their beliefs around CWD or whatever. And at the heart of it, we're really just conservationists, and we want what's best for the deer. We want what's best for the herd, and what's best for us as people that enjoy pursuing these animals too. So
right, and that's where, when it gets into Buffalo County, now their entire economy in Buffalo County is based on whitetail and deer and outdoors and hunting, as far as the guides, the outfitters, and it's just not one or two. The real estate too, some of the highest priced real estate in the state. So the investment of money into land, people's passions and dreams, and then people's livelihoods depend on this. And that's where the tipping point comes in. So knowing full well that lives will be destroyed, families will be ruined, because economic hardship ruins families. That's just a sad fact. Mm-hmm. So knowing that dreams will be destroyed, goals will be destroyed, investment will be destroyed, and families and livelihoods will be destroyed, we'll do this anyways. And that's where I have a problem with it, because this is one thing, the bad. This is the ugly. This is what is horrible. And we'll go on to the next ugly right here, sharpshooters. Within 2 to 4 properties around me in most direction, there are sharpshooters. They started baiting 2 weeks ago. And I know this because a local police chief keeps me informed on this. Started baiting 2 weeks ago. Last weekend they started shooting. And what they do is they are invited to farms. It's kind of like, like a vampire. They can't destroy your house unless you actually invite them into your house. Kind of the same thing. And so what happens is, you have to actually invite these people, these federal sharpshooters. I think they're federal. They start baiting 2 weeks ago, and then they come in this last weekend, and they basically go in at night, and they sit over the bait pile with suppressors, and they shoot any and every deer that comes to the bait. They're not specific to does, fawns, or bucks. They shoot every deer that comes in. One of the problems with that is, of course, they're using bait. It can pull deer from a mile. So we're afraid to go out on our land right now because I don't want to bump deer off our property and they end up at some bait pile 2 properties away or a mile away and get picked off by federal sharpshooters at night. Now, a lot of times, these lands that they're going on, they might have some woods, but a lot of it's full ag. The farmers, I'm not saying they don't care about CWD, but the reason they're having people in there is they want their livelihood protected as far as their yield of corn or whatever kind of crop they're growing, so it's not decimated by deer. So now these sharpshooters come in. I know on one farm last year they killed 130 deer, and that destroyed the hunting for everyone around there.
So I'm just curious, do you know, is their goal for killing all these deer, is it to reduce the population, or is it to get as many specimens to test then?
I think both.
Okay.
Both reduce population, and that's why like those CWD hunts that they had special this year, where it's 2 days or 3 days, and you get to, if you shoot a deer, you have to take it in, mandatory. They added another CWD hunt the end of last season. I don't know if you remember, it was around Christmas time. That's when Jake and Sam were here, and we all went out hunting together. And so they added that because they didn't hit their quotas yet for numbers, and it might have been testing subjects too. But bottom line is, we don't even know what they do with the deer. I mean, that'd be a question.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about that too. We're hoping it's not a giant wasted resource, but we suspect it is.
Yeah.
But that's another thing. Sharpshooters coming in at night, that's an overreach.
Agreed.
Doesn't need to be done, and it doesn't need to be done. It's such small sample sizes that if you look at the whole big picture, it's going to destroy people's dreams, destroy people's, in the case of Buffalo County, livelihoods, families.
I think, if this is a matter of testing, I could see, or even if it's a matter of trying to reduce that population, why are we not focusing on the antlerless portion, the does in the herd that, are going to be dropping fawns in a few months, rather than just throwing this blanket out and killing everything?
Especially when at least 3/4 of our bucks right now are still carrying antlers.
Sure.
So it's pretty easy to know which one's a buck and which one's not, even if you take that approach. But if you're a federal sharpshooter with a sniper rifle, basically, and full suppressor, and you're using night vision, you probably could see if they're a buck or not before you you shoot them. I encourage you. A lot of people don't even know when that's going on in southeast Minnesota. I luckily have a good police chief friend in the area that keeps us apprised of these things. But I would go, if you suspected it, your neighbors, I'd go knock on their door and have a little chat with them. I'm not saying to be confrontational, but I would like to hear, I would do the same here. If I find out any of my neighbors around here, I'm going to knock on their door and I'm going to talk to them and have a little chat about that, because it's something that that is, I can see them wanting to reduce deer for their crops, but if they're doing it under the guise of CWD, I think it's a shame.
Absolutely.
And really, I think those landowners and neighbors, I think they need to inform themselves, let's just put it that way, to a little bit higher degree if they're inviting. And that's the bottom line, balance is needed. It's one thing to monitor herds, to take your heads in, to actually change regulations that are appropriate. It's another thing down here, the Buffalo County example, sharpshooters, where they've wasted millions and millions of dollars. And we could debate this. Right now, they passed a bill where there's $100 million annually for the next 5 years going for CWD research. Now, we waste a huge amount of money in this country on ungodly, just horrible things that are ridiculous. And so this is one thing where I don't like the United States government spending tax dollars on stupid, frivolous things. I'm not saying that $100 million annually is a stupid thing, considering the billions we spend for everything else.
When you look at, it's probably a drop in a bucket when it comes.
When you consider everything else, so
it's just piled on top of all the other money wasted, and I just don't see how this is going to necessarily help us achieve the goal.
At least it's something towards hunters and CWD.
Yes.
I would bet that 80% of that's going to be wasted, like it is in every other government program. We've all heard of the $30,000 toilets and everything else, but it's anytime the government's involved, unfortunately. These are too big of dollars for sportsmen groups to handle.
I think it's just kind of interesting to follow the science or follow the money. Where is this going, and is it actually going to programs and things that are going to benefit CWD in the future, or
Yeah,
like in Wisconsin, is nothing going to change for another 20 years?
And that's so true, Dylan. I think we should have said, instead of follow the science, follow the money, because that's what dictates a lot of this. And I don't like, it's really PC to be 100% anti-CWD, meaning you follow everything and you swallow every dose of Kool-Aid that the state or feds give you.
Sure.
If you're that person where you hear CWD and whatever practice, Buffalo County, sharpshooters, whatever practice comes through you think is a good thing, then you really need to spend some time opening your eyes and joining the real world and using a strong dose of common sense.
Absolutely.
You really do, because there's a lot of people that swallow every dose of Kool-Aid the state, the feds, organizations throw at them. And you folks, we have a brain. We're not sheep. We can use our own brain. We can follow the science, follow the dollars, look at history, look at the decades in the past out west, look at the state of Wisconsin. A lot of people don't realize we've lived with CWD right personally where I hunt, near where I hunt, since 2002. And the sky is not falling. We're still waiting yet. A lot of us are still waiting for that to happen.
Yep.
And
I just think there's better ways to incentivize the end goals. And
I think there's smarter ways.
yeah, absolutely. And so can I pitch that idea that I mentioned earlier about, in Minnesota they allow you to kill $3 now? How many
Yeah.
does? In Wisconsin it's still a $2 state, but they want you to kill more deer. Well, if you want to reduce population, why not incentivize? I know we tried earn a buck in Wisconsin and it went over horribly, but why not reduce it to a $1 state and then incentivize that second buck to
where
maybe
you'd actually earn it,
or something like that?
something to try to get more samples and
Yep.
make it so that when you shoot a deer, it's mandatory to check that deer in, whatever it is. But I don't think we have to jump to extremes that pass that balance, that actually create the potential for destroying lives and destroying families, destroying livelihoods, property values. That's where we take this a bridge too far. And that's kind of what we're looking at. I like monitoring. I'm not even totally opposed to the $100 million annually spent, but I do know that 80% of that's going to be wasted like every other government program and every other piece of pork that they have in there and lining the pockets. I mean, sharpshooters, over $20 million that's been spent in Wisconsin since '02, and it's probably a lot more than that still. It's a lot of money who's making the money on that? It's not sportsmen, it's groups. So, really follow the money, follow the common sense, and don't think like sheep, please. We're just urging you because this is important to both of us. We're in the hunting industry, and God forbid it ever jumps from CWD to affecting people. Yep. Because that's going to be terrible and irreversible.
Sure.
And it won't matter what kind of monitoring we've done up to this point, how much we've spent on sharpshooters. God forbid that ever happens. Mm-hmm. That's why I kind of lean towards spending research. I just feel bad it's through the federal government because most of those dollars are wasted. So I hope you guys can think of this in a little bit more of an open mind.
This is a comment thread I can't wait to sift through.
Yeah, we're as conservationist minded as anybody. We actually create whitetail property, but wildlife properties, because you can't create good whitetail. We talk about the indicator species of grouse, pheasant, turkeys, rabbits. When you have bountiful small game populations, that's an indicator of a good whitetail population. You can't have one without the other. There's a lot of things we talk about, and we talk about doing it not with the direction of this college class or university study told us to do this. We actually use real world experience and common sense, which a lot of times goes a lot longer. And we just want to help you guys out. And I hope this discussion's been, I know it's one-sided on our part, but to me, it's a very important, serious topic, but there's been a bridge too far lately with some of these regulations, and I hope people are having a hard time sleeping at night that are involved in some of these sharpshooters, the actions in Buffalo County that might take place. There's some people that really don't deserve the tag of wildlife or resource professional when they're standing behind some of these regulations, and we'll leave it at that. Hey, I'm really excited to introduce to you our Hills and Thermals web class. It's something we worked on all year. We're trying to put lots of facets of scouting, aerial imagery, diagrams on the whiteboard to really teach you how the wind moves through hills and how you should find bedding areas, how it relates to deer movements in general, how that relates to this is a bedding area stand, this is a food source afternoon stand. We really tried to put this together and offer you a complete picture of how to navigate hills and find better success consistently where you hunt.